Wow, you gotta be f***ing kidding me. Jesus. What's going on? Hey, I'm Ronny Dahl, and as you can see, I'm in a bit of a predicament. In this video, I'm going to help you avoid being stranded by bringing a couple of little things that could potentially save your travel, save your holiday, and even worst case, save your life. How can one foresee what's going to go wrong? I mean, there's nuts and bolts you can bring, there's filters, there's fluids like oil and radiator fluid, which I really need right now. There's, oh man, there's so much stuff that you could bring. But we have created a map of Australia with hotspots in regions, so you know what you need to carry. But not only that, how much should one carry? We're going to go through all that right now. Welcome to the program, folks. This is a map of Australia. No, it's not a tropical map, although it does look like a heat-sensitive map. This is a carefully planned remoteness map. It represents how remote you are and how far away help is and where you need spare parts and where you may not need as many. So the green zone represents infrastructure, built up areas, plenty of help around. The orange zone represents where things have become a bit of a nuisance, but there should be some help around. And the red zone, folks, that is where careful planning needs to be put into place, and there are many spare parts you should be carrying or your convoy should be carrying. This map was produced over a lot of thought, a lot of consideration, and a lot of experience from traveling around. A few people were consulted, well-traveled people, and as you can see, for example, Cape York is not in a red zone, and that's because if you're planning a trip there, you'd probably be right, because every influencer is generally up there in Cape York, every year. 3 times a year sometimes 4 times. But let's find out what we need, and we'll cross back live. The first thing you should do before we talk about all these spare parts and all the things we're going to go through, get yourself a repair manual book or download a PDF form for your phone or whatever, just so you know how to actually fix your vehicle. Regardless if you're a mechanically minded or not, this is going to help you. It will also help you determine what part is actually broken on your vehicle. So if you're out in the middle of nowhere, this is going to come in handy, because you'll be able to tell your mechanic, hey, this and this part is actually broken on my vehicle. First section of our spares is going to be about tyres. This is my tyre repair kit. I know it's a repair kit, but it also has spares in there. So I've assembled this myself, and we'll get to that in a sec. Because the first thing we need to address, this is a tyre. This is a spare tyre, as you know. We just need to address this. This is very obvious for most of you out there, but a lot of people don't realise or haven't really put any thought to what their spare tyre is. Is it the same size as the rest of them? Because that is very important. Is the rim the same size? Is the tyre the same size? Is the condition of the tyre any good? And when should you have 2 spares? That's the old debate. Let's go upstairs, because that will really crystal clear clarify where I recommend you have 1 spare and where you have 2 spares. And you might be surprised in my opinion. 1 spare, 2 spares? That is the question. Green zone. Definitely just 1 spare, but make sure it's the right size for your vehicle, right? The orange zone, 1 spare will do. You can generally find some help or another tyre if you need it. Depending on what size you're carrying, if you're carrying like an odd size, maybe then consider carrying 2, but it's up to you. The red zone, self-sufficiency. You want to be carrying 2 spares. You can also carry a carcass, so you don't have to carry the whole rim. It will save weight as well, just for those times you do a red zone trip. I'm going to get the 2 main things out of my repair kit that I recommend as spares. So these are all zone spares. The first bit I'm going to talk about is the valve cores. They're tiny, they cost nothing. Just have at least 4 of those. The reason why I carry these is when you get dirt inside your valve core, the grit can sort of work at the rubber bits, and after a while they'll start leaking. So if you find that your tire's got a slow leak, it's generally one of these valve cores that's buggered. So just change it out. On top of that, you can get the valve stems. So this is a whole Schrader valve. So you have the valve cap, you've got the valve core, like the ones that I showed you, and you've got the whole stem itself. So if you carry 4 of these, you've got the full assembly, And that should be about all you really need. Considering I've gone through 15 of these valve cores over 10 years, that'll give you a good indication. If you carry 4 of these and they take up no room, that should be in your tyre repair kit, which should be an all-zone kit. This is your standard repair kit, a couple of cords, a borer, an insertion tool, and, well, a tyre gauge. With my kit, I'll put it in a nice flat bag, rubber gloves, just in case, extra cords, different sizes, pliers, because they help, also patches and glue for the inside of the tyre, because when you plug a tyre, it's just a plug. If you get a hole on the actual part of the tyre that touches the surface, you can patch it with a proper patch, and you don't have to worry about that plug possibly coming out. You can't do your sidewall with these though. If you're going to do your sidewall, you must do it with a plug. Just for my own safety and your safety, I recommend you do not drive with a plug in your tyre on the highway. If you're on the dirt road or you're on a track, it's better just to plug the tyre than to go through all the hard work taking it off, because you could get another puncture later on, right? So I recommend you change the tyre before you hit the highway. Otherwise, just plug the bastard, because it's going to be much easier for you. A lot less heavy lifting. Welcome back to the studio where I'm trying on a new fashion statement. I have 4 broken wheel studs right here. And as you will see right there, that's when they came off. This has happened to me once where the wheel studs have snapped, but I've lost wheel nuts twice, but managed to save the wheel the first time. However, the second time, it ended up like this, which is not a good thing. So wheel studs and wheel nuts, that is one of the most important spares you can carry, and they take up absolutely zero room. So I would suggest that you have a full set. So for me, being a 70 series Land Cruiser, it is 5 wheel studs and 5 wheel nuts. For yourself, it's more than likely 6. Most vehicles have 6, definitely carry those. So I will carry those for green, orange, and red zone. Just everywhere. It's such a small item to have, and it's very easy to leave out of your spare parts. So just keep it somewhere in your vehicle where you're always going to have it. What do you reckon about the fashion statement? Is it going to take off? Time to put the brakes on. This is my brake repair kit where I keep all my spare parts and a couple of little things that are going to help me out. So I'll go in step of importance again. So not everyone has space for everything, and I'll keep bringing this up, but in steps of importance, at least you have part of the kits to get you going, right? So first thing I'm going to look at is front and rear brake pads. Now you've got to have that in particular zones, because if you don't have that, well, you've got no brakes, right? Second up, if you've got space, bring the brake cleaner. And third step is bring the brake fluid. So in case you're low, or in case something goes wrong, say you snap a line, that's step 4. Now ideally you'd have extra brake line with you. You're definitely going to need this stuff here. Look, in a red zone, to get yourself out of trouble, you can clamp it. This is an over top clamp. That's not what I would use this particular clamp for, but like say like a smaller G clamp or an actual hose clamp itself. You can get away with that. You just got to be real careful, and as soon as you're somewhere where you can get help, get it sorted proper. You can also, with braided brake lines, you can get an actual special screw to block the end of it. You've got to get the right size though. That's something I'm yet to add to my kit itself. So there you have it. That is my kit. Also with these G clamps, it can help you pry apart your brake pistons, because sometimes they get a bit seized and it's hard to change the actual brake pads. One more thing, with the brake fluid, make sure it is a sealed bottle. But if this has been sitting in a shelf for a while and the seal has been cracked, it's been used, it'll absorb moisture from the atmosphere and it won't be as effective. So make sure it's a brand new bottle. This may look like an old bottle. It has been kicking around for a bit, but it has not been, the seal has not been broken yet. Breaking news. Where should you carry this full brake kit? In a green zone, you won't need it. In an orange zone, up to you. But I would at least carry the brake cleaner. If you're going on a big trip, maybe spread the load across the whole convoy. That's not too bad. But let's talk about a red zone. You should definitely carry your brake pads, because should you get a seized piston like I've had a few times before, your brakes are going to be completely shot and you're going to need to replace those pads once you free up your piston. And if you can't free up your piston, you're going to go through your brake pads like there's no tomorrow. So for a big remote red trip, I would try and bring the whole kit, but you can spread it out amongst the group if there's a convoy. Someone carries the brake cleaner, someone else carries the brake fluid. Carry your own brake pads though, because you may not have the same vehicle as the other person. Hang around to the end of the video for a bonus tip. Wheel bearings, the last piece of the wheel to complete the thing going round and round. Without that thing going round and round, you're not going anywhere. So to me, I believe these should be for an orange zone up to a red zone, but we'll see what the weatherman says. Wheel bearings. Definitely carry wheel bearings for orange zone and the red zone. And if you have a trailer, you've got to carry them for the trailer as well. Trailers tend to go before vehicles because they sit around for a long time not doing anything, right? And also make sure you know if your trailer has Ford or Holden bearings. That's very important. On the table, there are two kits. There is a almost complete kit and there is a Toyota kit I've had to put together myself. And that's the thing I want to point out. If you order wheel bearings from Toyota, you've got to buy the inner, the outer, that's the racers and the bearings. Then you have your outer seal and your inner axle seal. And then you have your gaskets. So that is 5 different components you must order to complete a wheel bearing kit. Just something you need to be aware of, because if you ring up or you walk in, you say, I want some wheel bearings for my Toyota Land Cruiser, you're only going to get the bearings. You're not going to get all the other components that you will need. With the Terrain Tamer kit on the other hand, and let me just say, these guys are not sponsoring the show, even though you've seen a lot of their product. It's just where I decide to go to. They do sponsor Modify, but they're not sponsoring this video. Just putting it out there. You get the gaskets, you get the seal, you get the inner, you get the outer bearing. But there is no inner axle seal. So that is one thing you need to add to this kit. So the reason why I'm pointing this out is when you do get your spares kit put together, make sure you have every single component that you need for that specific part of the vehicle, because it gets a bit technical, and if you're not mechanically minded or you're not aware of this, like I wasn't 5 or 7 years ago, that caught me out. I didn't have the inner axle seal, which left me stranded for 3 days. The other good thing about a kit like this, you get it in a box. All you need to do is add the inner seal to the box. It's all right there. With this, on the other hand, you're going to have to make up your own bag. The people that are saying, well, I'd rather go genuine over non-genuine, these are actually from the same factory. They're Koyo bearings, they're Koyo bearings. Also, the front and the rears are different. More things to be aware of. A special tool to remove your bearings will help you out a lot. You can do it without, but it's much easier with that tool. And of course, grease. There's no use having this and not having any grease. Some people actually pre-pack these and then shrink wrap them and take them with them. That is a smart thing to do, but you still need to bring grease for the actual hub itself. That's what you need if you're bringing this as a spare. On top of that, I recommend doing a massive service. When I say massive service, that's getting all your hubs redone before a big red zone trip. With the orange zone, if you only have your wheel bearings, not the grease and all that, look, that's fine too, because maybe you don't have space for all that gear, but you want to carry the wheel bearings. At least then if something goes wrong, you can get your vehicle towed to the nearest workshop and you have the part. You don't have to sit around and possibly wait a couple of days for parts to arrive. That's all I can add. Let's talk filters, and at the moment we're in a green zone. So in my opinion, what I'm about to tell you, you should have with you at all times. I've got a snorkel. Now, everyone who has a snorkel should have a snorkel sock. And the reason for that, follow me. Snorkel sock. Now, I'll throw that on as soon as I get to a gravel road, especially if I'm following people. If I'm in front, yeah, maybe not. I'll save it for a dusty day. This is all about preventative measure, because once you dust your air filter, you get less performance, start to think about, oh, I need to have a spare filter now so I can change it out. So even if you're out on a day drive, you're on a gravel road, you're in a convoy, just bring this. The next step for filters is to bring a spare filter. So this is a full filter that goes into my airbox. Definitely have one of those, especially if you're in orange zone going into red or whatever. You should just have one of those with you, because after a big long dusty trip, you want to change that filter. Dust in the engine is not good. Air filters in Australia, where's the dust zone? Dust, 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 dust. There's dust everywhere. Just carry your snorkel sock on all zones. Green, orange, red. Takes up no room. With your air filter though, look, I would only really carry that for an orange or a red zone. Most people have only one diesel filter. I have two. We'll get to the second one in a sec. But the most important one is your factory filter. Always carry a spare one because you can get dirt and fuel around town, country towns, out in the bush, anywhere. Over time, they will accumulate and get dirty and you'll have to change them. A light will pop up on your dashboard. It will indicate you need to take it into your dealership and get it changed. Just learn how to do it yourself. It is the most simplest thing you can change on your vehicle. It is foolproof, it's so easy. So carry a filter with you, and if you have a secondary filter like I have, then consider carrying one of those as well, because if this one gets dirty, more than likely that one's dirty, because that one down there doesn't have an indication light, this one here does. So change them both when you change one. Fuel filters, where to carry those? Look, in a green zone, it's convenient to have, but should your indication light come up saying you've got a dirty filter, you have time. You can generally get away with it for maybe a day or two before you should get it changed. But you should make every effort to get it changed as soon as possible, just to be on the safe side. If you're in an orange zone, definitely carry it. It's so small, it's convenient, because the last thing you want, you're on your way, on your trip, that's gonna be playing on your mind for the whole trip. Stop then and there, change the filter, and off you go on your merry trip. Still on filters, look, we're not going to bring an oil filter with us unless we're on a big trip around Australia and we're doing our own servicing to our vehicle. With nuts and bolts, you can't carry every single size, and a lot of people don't want to carry the big ones. So if you're missing a specific size that you don't have, you can always look at your vehicle or your friend's vehicle and then try and find something that's not as important as a part that is actually missing, or where your nut or bolt is missing, or both even. You might think that carrying spare nuts and bolts is a bit of a gimmick. Honestly, countless times have I found this useful. And it's not always my own vehicle, it's usually someone else's vehicle half the time. I've had that scenario before on one of my control arms. I was missing one of the nuts and I desperately needed one. So we found one somewhere else and put it on there because it's part of the suspension. It's quite important on the vehicle. So you could look on a bash plate or a cross member. Some cross members have a lot of nuts and bolts on them. You can fix the problem there and then, rather than worrying about it and sorting it out later. It's just convenience. And also check out your mate's nut and bolt kit. Hopefully he's carrying one too. For this spare parts recipe today on the show, in the green zone for nuts and bolts, I recommend 1 cup. Orange zone, I recommend 2 cups of various nuts and bolts. And don't forget about your hex heads and all those other finicky ones. When we get to the red zone, I would recommend 3 to 4 cups. Sorry, this just in, every influencer has been washed out of Cape York because it's wet season. Duct tape, cable ties, that's the first part of my general list. Let's go to the studio and see how important they really are. Duct tape and cable ties. Look, if you're into kidnapping, you should probably have them in your boot at all times. However, if this is for 4-wheel drive purposes, which this is, I've just been reminded about that, I would just carry it in green, orange and red zone. You know, the more orangey and red the color is, the more you should probably just carry. I've gone through many rolls of tape out in bush and many zip ties. And no, I'm not a kidnapper. Coolant spare parts. Here's a good example for you. I'm in a green zone right now, so I don't have my spare fluid, I don't have my spare hoses. There's no point in carrying that in a green zone. There's a super cheap auto about 15 k's that way, Repco about 20 k's that way, Toyota dealership about 30 k's that way. I can sort myself out with a phone call, I've got phone reception. However, had this been in an orange zone, I might be 100, 150 k's away from the nearest place, but I still have relatively dodgy signal. There are still passerbys. I can get help still, but it's a nuisance. It's a bloody nuisance. But how often is this going to happen? Probably not very often at all, depending on your car. But what if I was in a red zone? Super remote, 38 degrees, it's pretty hot. Without anyone possibly coming past for maybe days, maybe weeks, I would really want these parts. And I've got no phone reception, and my sat phone, I can't find it. Do I have an EPIRB? Those are the things that you need to factor in for a red zone. I wish I had my fluid. I now wish I had my spare hose, but I'm actually in the green zone. And I've got to go right now because I've got to make a phone call and sort this out. Welcome back to the studio. What's that? We're leaving the studio again. What you saw there was a new hose. So when you replace your hoses with new ones, keep the old ones as the spare. Don't keep the new ones as spare, keep the old ones as spare. Let's talk fluids. We've got our map of Australia back here. Green, don't bother bringing any at all. Orange, I still wouldn't really bother. But when you get to the red zone, look, fluids are bulky. If you have a convoy, spread it out amongst us. One of you grab some coolant, someone else grabs some engine oil, and hopefully that engine oil suits all the vehicles. I wouldn't really bother with diff oil because if you leak all your diff oil out, you probably got bigger issues. Although if you do have space for it and it's a big convoy and you're in a red zone and you are getting up to some sort of hard stuff, maybe bring it then. Definitely bring grease though, because if you have your wheel bearings and stuff like that, you got to bring your grease. When it comes to coolant, you could bring a 20-litre drum like that, or you could bring a little 5-litre or a 1-litre concentrated bottle. Far better option. If you do bring engine oil, you don't need to bring a whole heap so you can do a service out there. This is just to get you out. It's not to get you to continue your trip, it's to get you out to get proper help. With your serpentine belts, if you have one belt, definitely carry a spare, guys. This is the old belt, the new belt's actually in there. Always put the new one in, keep the old ones as a spare. If you have a multi-belt version, carry all the belts. They don't take up much room. Serpentine belt. Green zone, you don't need it. Orange zone, if it's fairly new, you probably don't need to worry about it, but I would still squeeze one in if I had an old one lying around. But what I'm saying is I wouldn't go out and buy a new one just as a spare. And if you do buy a new one, replace it. Keep the old one as a spare. And in a red zone, that's probably what you should be doing, is taking the old one out as a spare and putting a new one in. And just to clarify, every time you go and do a red zone trip, don't change your serpentine belt. Once you've done it once and you have your spare, you have your spare. It's amazing what you can fit in a little bag. I have a variety of pretty much everything covered, so I'm just going to quickly jump through it. Micro fuses, which suit my vehicle, accessory fuses, slightly bigger fuses, MIDI fuses, generally found in your engine bay or connecting wires. Like if you have a Manager 30, you usually use that type of connection. Circuit breaker, spare one of those. Good if you're one of those people that tow, and speaking of towing, Anderson plugs. Anderson plugs are usually a problem when the wire hangs down and gets trapped, gets ripped off. Definitely recommend one of those. Don't really need the terminals that are in it because generally they don't rip off. If they rip off, you've probably got bigger problems. This is the fastest and quickest and probably the most dodgiest way of just quickly sorting a wire out to get out of the jail-free card. That's right here. Plenty of options there. So you just snap them off, join the wires, and then we get to all the other connecting parts. So we got all the little connectors which you can crimp on. Crimping's good because you don't have to solder. And we got like soldering versions. We got heat them up. We got heat shrink. We got electrical tape just to get you out of a quick fix. And then we got various lengths of wire. Now I like to carry wire that already has terminals on it so I can already fault find as well with these, but also I can quickly connect it up for something that's been cut. And we've got slightly thicker wires as well for where we need that. And then conduit, just in case we need it if it's in like a dodgy area. So that is my electrical kit in a nutshell. You'll be surprised how many people you can help out with a kit like this. Get on it. Yes folks, get on it. And I would actually recommend a spare electrical kit like that in all zones, green, orange and red. Why? Because it takes up no room. Say you're on a day trip down to the beach and your fridge stops working because it's blown a fuse and you didn't bring your spare fuses. Or say your mate's fridge has stopped working. There's free beer to be had. And it's so small and compact, it's easy to leave out if you're going on a big trip. So you might as well carry it and just find somewhere to put it amongst those other things that you should have for all zones. And just keep it in the vehicle. Here's some bonus advice for these regions. In a green zone, as you know already, you don't have to bring a lot of gear. And the gear that you do bring for a green zone, you should have in your vehicle all the time. Just find somewhere, it's going to take up no room. When it comes to the orange zone, you can expand on a few things that you're kind of iffy about. Oh, maybe I should bring this, maybe I shouldn't. Those things, if you're having a bit of trouble with your vehicle in certain areas, maybe those are the parts that you need to take with you. As I've mentioned many times already, spread the gear between the convoy. For a green zone, well, the gear that you bring there, every vehicle should have and should always be in the vehicle. And then you're never going to forget it. It's the convenient stuff, it takes up no room. When it comes to the orange zone, if you have a convoy, you can start adding a few extra things that you would normally only carry for a red zone. However, because the convoy is so big, there's more space to share between you. When you get to a red zone, convoy space is always going to help you out. If you're doing a solo trip, you are going to have to face the fact that you are going to need to carry a lot of stuff, because not only is there no one else to carry it, there's also no one else to help you out in that red zone. You gotta be self-sufficient, you gotta help yourself. The only one who's got your back on a solo trip is you. We've spoken a lot about spare parts. Now, most of the stuff we talked about are general parts to suit all vehicles, makes, models, and all people's types of travel. However, there are a few other things that we haven't covered, and those things could be like the alternator, the CV, the rear axle. There are so many other things, pulley bearings, water pumps. There are so many things that could be added to this list, but those things are more for individual situations. If you have a vehicle that's prone to overheating or prone to water pump failures, or for example, a 70 series prone to alternator problems. Alternators always go on a 70 series. So if you're doing a red zone trip in a 70 series, you need to carry a brush kit for your alternator or the whole alternator itself. And there are other vehicles, perhaps a starter motor, say an automatic 4-litre FJ or the N70 Hilux with the petrol 4-litre motor with the starter motor. You're gonna need to bring that, especially if it's an automatic. Crossing back live to Ronny out in 38-degree heat, trying to sort out his heating issue. Yeah, no worries, mate. I'll text you my GPS coordinates just to make it easier. I'll see you soon. Yeah, I'll shout you at the pub. All good, mate. All good. Thank you very much. Oh, he's hung up already. All right, I'm in a green zone, which is great because I've got a mate coming to help me out. So I'm literally waiting for a mate. I have a question though for you guys. If you are traveling around in a green zone, are you going to be carrying the green zone items that we specified in this video? Let me know down below in the comments. And if you have a mate who's going to travel a red zone, share this video with him because it may help him out. It may even save his life if he's on one of those tracks where there's no one for days. Self-sufficiency. All right, guys. See you in the next video.